Hello everybody, welcome to the Eternal Card and Patch Breakdown. We're going to be talking a little bit about the gameplay improvements that came to Eternal today, and also we are going to be talking about a brand new batch of spoilers for Eternal Empire of Glass, which I believe is releasing either end of this month or early next month. But yeah, the pre-order should be available, I think, this weekend, so things are going to be pretty exciting. In any case, we're going to be talking about those cards, and also there has been a recent patch to Eternal. If you did not know, it is a gameplay improvement patch, which, oh boy, I'm very excited about these. Eternal has not gotten a lot of updates in this particular area for a very long time, and honestly, I think that it definitely has needed some work on a couple of different areas, and some of these areas have seen some work, and it's actually going to make the game a little bit more fun. So let's talk about what's going on. First things first, you can now have 250 friends in your social list. So if you are limited by the 100 friend list, that is no longer a problem for you. I don't use the Eternal Friends list very much for the most part, since most of my stuff is related to streams and streamers, but we do get a lot of friend requests, and hopefully at some point they'll also have the ability to basically turn down massive amounts of requests because I have so many floating in my inbox already. But in any case, the additional friends list is going to be really helpful for tournaments, and adding people should just be very useful for that kind of setup. If you're playing in tournaments, typically community-based tournaments, then you need to add a bunch of people as friends very often, and the limit actually did become kind of an irritant for people. So this is something that's going to be a little bit more handy for setting up your social list. You also have deck select screens, which is by far the thing I'm most excited about, since it means that the number of maximum decks that you can have has been increased to 75 per format from a total of 81 period. That means that we are now able to run Expedition and Throne decks in two different tabs. They are separated out evenly, and you can look at either one to see exactly what you need. So yeah, you have an Expedition tab, you have a Throne tab, you build your decks in either mode, and then you take them into the correct area. Makes it really easy to find the decks you're looking for, and if you want to basically put something into a Throne queue, then you can just create it as a Throne deck. Should be really, really handy for making sure that you're not taking an Expedition deck into Throne, which is a very common issue as far as things go. And yeah, we've tried it out a little bit. The new deck listing format looks really, really smooth and clean, so very excited about that. Queues and ladders have been changed up a little bit, so you can just use you have to choose Throne or Expedition with your particular setup, but basically they just reduce the amount of button presses that you have to push. And also, deck building is also now always in advanced mode, meaning that you no longer have the ability to just build a 50 card deck and the power gets added automatically. Instead, there's no setting to enable advanced deck building, and power cards are just always shown, so you have a full 75 card list always, and the add power button only appears when needed. I don't think a lot of people were using the non-advanced deck building mode in the first place. Most people who join are from areas like Magic, so seeing a 50 card deck where the power is added automatically can be something of a turnoff, and I imagine it was probably even confusing for new players to not necessarily know that you could turn advanced deck building on or off, although I think it was a checkbox that was available pretty immediately, but it seems like nobody was using that, so getting rid of it makes a lot of sense, and I think is a good UI thing overall. There have been improvements to the ability to target select, improved hand minimize, maximize behavior, and a couple of UI improvements, as well as some VO adjustments, some gauntlet deck adjustments, and it sounds like that there may end up being a split of Gauntlet, Throne, and Expedition, although that is promised for the future, or hinted at in the future rather than promised. So that is potentially something that you will be able to do in the future. Gonna be really, really cool to see if we see more of these gameplay updates. I am so excited to see new changes to the general format. That being said, we're mainly here to talk about cards. So let's talk about the new cards coming up in Bastion Rising. We're going to talk about their design, we're going to talk about where they fit, Expedition, Draft, or ranked, since sometimes they fit in all three, sometimes they only fit in some, and we're going to talk about what kind of decks you can build with them, what kind of interesting synergies that you can make with them. Also, we're going to talk about a new skill that has been added, one of the three that we there may be more than that, but one of the many that we know are going to exist in Empire of Glass. We already know about Regen and Awakened, and Regen has been revealed today. So let's get into it, shall we? Regen is an ability that shows up on units such as the Queen of Glass, and it specifically says that when the unit takes damage, it is effectively an Aegis for damage. So if the unit takes damage from a torch or from a trade or from like just bashing its head into like a relic weapon, or a relic weapon bashing its head into it, if anything deals damage to the unit, that damage is automatically prevented and the unit regenerates to full health, which is to say the regen is basically a divine shield. If you're a Hearthstone familiar, it's the kind of thing where you get the just sort of like shield based effect, and then once that pops off, you have the ability to maybe trigger regenerate effects, such as on this battle bear here. So yeah, like if you have this 6/6 battle bear and this attacks into a 1/1 deadly scorpion or a 2/5 decay Roland or something like that, you will prevent all damage dealt by the unit, and then the battle bear will regenerate, which causes the regenerate trigger and turns it into a 10/10 berserk unit, which means that, of course, you then get to attack with it next turn as a 10/10 berserk and do some ridiculous nonsense, although it will no longer have the regenerate ability at that point. It's just a one-time effect, which assumably replenishes the same way Aegis does if you bounce the card and put it back into play, or if you resurrect the card from the void. So yeah, this is a really simple, really like battle-tested, just excellent mechanic. There's not too much to say about it. It exists as Divine Shield in Hearthstone already. I believe it exists in a lot of other card game formats. Like, this is just something that like makes a lot of sense, and it exists as Aegis and Eternal, and Aegis and Eternal is actually just an amazing, like, really generally good effect. The only thing that's like not good about Aegis and Eternal is that it can be used on your face a lot, and that's been kind of a problem recently, but I would say that like overall, like, what this does is just increase the number of interactions necessary to trigger a particular effect, meaning that you have stickier units that stick around on board longer, and when there are stickier units that stick around on board longer and removal is less good, that generally leads to a more robust format with a lot more decision making, because building units out on the board is kind of the way that you create interesting battle positions. It's just sort of the way that interesting decisions are made and interesting boards begin to develop. A lot of fun stuff can happen the more stuff sticks on the board, and the more you are sort of like punishing control and punishing like high damage effects, like, and the more you are sort of complicating the battlefield, I think that that generally leads to a better sort of format. Although you can get too complicated, but in any case, the basic idea here is that like if you are playing around with stuff that's a little bit stickier, that usually leads to a pretty interesting like unit focused game. And so this could potentially lead to a very interesting meta in the future. Battle Bear is clearly hot bunkers. Like, it's a lot of fun to play with. The main disadvantages to it are, of course, it doesn't have any particular onboard effect beyond just being a 6/6. It's kind of hard to kill. So if you remove this card with like a Death Strike or something like that, it's gone. It doesn't do anything after that. Feeding Time, Turn to Seed, all of that standard stuff that removes it can still remove it, but relic weapons, anything that trades really well with it, deadly cards like at any cost, or decay cards like at any cost, none of that will kill the Battle Bear, and all of it will cause the Battle Bear to trigger. So yeah, I think the main issue with the design of this card might be that you're not going to be able to trigger that regenerate effect very often, or very frequently you're going to be trying to trigger it yourself, which is a hard thing to do in green and blue. But if you can trigger it yourself, then a 10/10 attacking Berserker is kind of a game ender, so there's some fun stuff that you can do with the card. This looks like it will be an okay expedition option. I think it's probably too weak for Throne just because it's 6/6 for 6, and it doesn't have any immediate onboard effect. Like, there's just like too much you can do early in Huru and too much you can do late in Huru that can actually like have much better effects than Battle Bear in that respect. In draft, this card is a ridiculous monster. Like, Regenerate is going to be very, very powerful in draft because there isn't going to be as much hard removal, and also like there's going to be a lot more trading. So this is a card that's going to be really, really strong in that format because A, it's a really, really big monster, and B, it doesn't really have evasion, but being a 10/10 kind of with the ability to attack twice kind of means that it doesn't really matter that it has evasion. The card is still something of a bomb in this format. It will have like small problems with like tokens and sort of getting like into a position where it can't really block or anything like that. But I mean, this card is just going to trade and trade and trade in a draft format, so it's a really, really fun draft rare to pick up. I think it's going to be in the upper end of draft cards. It's going to be in the like middle end of expedition cards, and Throne's probably not going to play it, but you never know. There may be some Battle Bear combo where you really need to get a 6-drop with 10 like 20 damage out. I think that's very unlikely. It just doesn't provide anything that's like got what Throne wants, but it's still kind of a really interesting option. Other regen cards we have going on. Controlled Demolition gives one of your units double damage and regen. So the card deals double damage and it gets a damage shield. Gonna be a pretty awesome combat trick considering it is a 5 cost. It costs 3 less to play on Sentinels. Notably, this is a green card that has Sentinel synergy. Valkyries are in red in this set, and I expect that we are going to be seeing color shifted tribal in a number of different formats, including green Sentinels. So yeah, you can probably expect to see more green Sentinels in the future, just because like this fast spell specifically cares about Sentinels, and it looks like that Sentinel is kind of an unusual automaton in the style of Grenadin or like even like Valkyrie. So like I would expect like this weird mechanical monstrosity is a harbinger of things to come, and we're going to be seeing some green Sentinels in the future. That's my prediction. Let's hope that we are correct. In any case, this is pretty interesting stuff. Like, we have at least, like, I mean, this is an Aegis and double damage in the same play. So if you're seeing, like, a torch response to one of your units, you can just, like, completely roll over them with, like, a very, very nasty option. At 5, this card is probably not very good, but if you can find some, like, cheap Sentinels, and I believe there is a 3-cost 4/2 with, like, Overwhelm, there's some pretty interesting options to make this card very playable as an option for, like, a fast Sentinel deck or a charge Sentinel deck. I could see a Throne deck with that kind of setup, like Bond Sentinels or, like, Charge Sentinels actually getting some traction, probably in, like, Rakano colors. Rakano Sentinels, oh my! I would also say that this is going to be a pretty solid expedition card, assuming there is Sentinel support. Like, this seems like something that's going to be pretty handy. In draft, it does require you to have Sentinels, but, like, also in draft, a 5-cost combat trick is playable, so this should be fine in that format as well. It's probably not great in any of the 3 formats, but in all 3 of them, it has the potential to be bonkers, and it should be, like, at least consistent enough to get something going in terms of value. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Someone is suggesting that there might be Primal Grenadin. I could definitely see that happening. It certainly seems like the ones that we've seen so far are Red Valkyrie and Green Sentinels. So, like, the other tribes that were very common in set 1 may also be coming into play. I could definitely see Primal Grenadin, or Shadow Grenadin, which already do exist, or Time Grenadin. Time Grenadin seems actually the most likely. Okay, so next up, other regen cards that we have seen. The Premier Regen card to sort of demonstrate the format. 4/4 Reckless Regen, Summon Plunder. This is Encroaching Vine. It is a Mandrake. Mandrakes are fairly common and are mentioned in the lore for this set, so we can expect to see a couple of them at the very least. Yeah, so this card is, you know, just a reasonable option in a draft. Like, it is a good beater that has Regen and also Summon Plunder. Plunder at 5 is not a thing that most people are looking for all that much, so I don't think this is going to see a lot of Expedition or Throne play, but it's clearly just sort of a role player in a draft format, and you're not going to be too unhappy with Plunder in draft because it turns all of your extra power into treasure troves, which is definitely a useful function. Yeah, this is something that definitely should be okay in draft as a common, but beyond that, like, it's reckless, so, like, there's not really too much that's going for it. The stat line's not good, the reckless ability's pretty bad. The regen is really nice and means the deck card is going to be pretty aggressive, but, like, you need some kind of, like, weird support to make this card better. So, seems unlikely to be seen in play in anything other than draft. And even there, it's kind of like a C+. It's not going to be amazing. The last regen card is Dichro Vindicated. This is a flying endurance. When Dichro hits the enemy player, he gets regen. Doesn't have regen right away. Notably an insane draft bomb due to the fact that it is a flying endurance 5/6. Just, like, straight up, that is going to be better than the, like, premier green flyer in the format, which is Ironbeak Owl, or, oh man, it's been so long since I've actually named the, like, the 4/6 endurance owl. It's not Ironbeak. I don't remember the name of it at the moment, but, like, in any case, this is a 5/6 flying endurance, so in draft this is going to be a hot nonsense monster, you're going to be really happy to have it. In Expedition, a flying endurance unit of this size that also gets damage shielding every now and then seems reasonable. The card doesn't have any immediate onboard impact, but it should be pretty good. Fourth Tree Elder, that is the name of the card. Yeah, so like overall, like I think it's going to be okay in Expedition. Should be a good like role-playing Valkyrie, and it does show that there's going to be green Valkyrie in this format, not just red ones. But yeah, so like Ricano Valks might like to have this card. In Throne, I don't think this card really has a place. Like, there's just a lot of good 6-drop Valkyries right now, and plenty of decent flyers in that format. Like, this is not going to replace Regen or anything like that in the Throne format. So, yeah, it's a really interesting Expedition card. Dichro Vindicated, of course, is the same Dichro as in the Shadow promo card that's out right now. So, yeah, you can take a quick look, and there'll be like a little bit of a matched lore thing going on between those two cards. Okay, so that's Regen. The other thing that we know is going to be a mechanic in the current format is that there are going to be some market cards, and we have 2 of them to be looking at today. We're looking at some very interesting approaches to the market. Thus far, there have been potentially 2 different cycles released that are related to the market, both of which do not access the market in traditional ways. We have the unit that is going to be that pays 3 to get a weapon out of the market, and then we have fair exchange. Puts one of your units into your market, then plays another unit from your market with the same cost or less. So yeah, you can basically swap anything that you have for anything else that you have in the market. If you have a creature base in your market, you can get out some wild ambush effects. You can trigger summon effects that are going to be pretty strong. The most notable thing about this card is that it's very playable in the sort of like fun stable format, where you are doing stuff like playing Northwind Herald for free, and then on the next turn when people try to kill the Northwind Herald, you fair exchange it, and you swap it out for a 6-drop with a powerful summon effect. It's a kind of like interesting unfair exchange type setup that you can get going, and there's a lot of different ways to create reduced cost cards, which might make it an interesting Throne combo card and should make it an interesting Expedition combo card. I think in both of those cases that's going to be pretty interesting. The nice part about this card is that even though it is like a very interesting combo option, yep, Bond is another great example, even though it is an interesting combat option, it is also something that can be played as a combat trick. You can just block something with like a Trailmaker and then turn that Trailmaker into a Desert Alchemist or a Scorpion. You can block something with like a big doofy wall that's like a 7-drop, or like something that's like, you can even swap something that is permafrosted to get something else that is not permafrosted. There's a lot of different ways that you can use fair exchange to really like mess up different types of cards. It also removes a lot of curse options from the game. Like permafrost just doesn't become a great removal card if you're using fair exchange. So like there's some really interesting tools that you can use here, and it's pretty exciting for the wide variety of different stuff that it can support. I think that it's an interesting approach to the market. It could be one of the most irritating cards in the meta, or it could be like really, really fun to play with. I think it's going to be probably a mix of both. Yeah, market cards can traditionally get a little bit stale just due to the fact that the 5 cards in the market often do not change from list to list very often, so you see a lot of the same stuff getting played. But I also think that this is like a really interesting combat trick, and there's a lot of potential for this card to provide a lot of interesting variety in the game. It's really going to be dependent on where people put their markets and whether people experiment with their markets, whether or not this card is successful. All right, the other card we have on that same line is the extremely cute and extremely sad Send to Market, which is 5 cost, fast spell, put a unit into its owner's market. It's not quite putting it at the bottom of the opponent's deck. It in fact puts it in a place where your opponent can access it pretty easily, but it does remove the card from the game, and it makes sure that it's not in the void. So I think it might be easier to fetch a card from your market than it is to fetch it from the void, but nonetheless, this is 1-for-1 card advantage and a removal spell in green that is a fast spell. I think this is perfectly fine. It is 5 cost, which is as it should be. I really wouldn't want to see green have 4 cost removal at fast spell speed. That's just like completely unconditional. But yeah, this is something that like is probably going to be very powerful in draft, probably going to be usable in Expedition. Probably not really a card for Throne just because it's so expensive, but you never know when you want just straight hard removal in green. That is potentially a thing that you can actually do a little bit of work with. And as you can see, it's a very sad robot cat, so if you'd like your your heartstrings tugged at. You can just look at that sad robot cat that has been constructed for its owner and is now being sold. Don't worry, they're going to a good home. That's a promise, maybe. I don't know. I'm worried I'm going to promise that there's going to be some art later that shows the cat being dismantled or something because evilness. Anyways, yeah, this is like really good draft card, of course, and just like a lot of fun to be playing with different options. You can even put stuff into your own market if you need to do like weird market shenanigans. That's probably not going to be a thing, but it's a potential way to like recover a card for like Wasteland Broker stuff or other like interesting nonsense. Overall, just a big, powerful, good removal spell that does put the card somewhere where you can pick it up again, but is probably going to be playable in Expedition and definitely going to be strong in Draft. So very, very cool stuff. All right, that is all of our cards for today. Thus far, looking to be a very interesting set. We have a lot of good sort of unit-focused mechanics coming out. We have a focus on markets, which is a little bit worrying, but also doesn't include traditional marketing, where you are definitely doing like much weirder things with the market, and how you build your market is going to be very, very unusual. And like there's also the color shifting. There's a lot of like, you know, unusual style choices. The lore is going to a new dimension and a new place. So this is going to be a pretty fresh take on Eternal. And if they keep pushing out those gameplay updates, then we might even see like a fresh Eternal client-y type setup while we were playing it, which yeah, I'm very excited for both of those things. In any case, like yeah, we now have a bunch more deck slots. We're going to build a bunch more decks. I realized that I reviewed a card yesterday that was already out for our spoiler list, Zumic Shaman. So as penance, we are currently building a Zumic Shaman deck for forgetting about it. So yeah, we'll probably have that out pretty soon. So feel free to tune in and subscribe if you're looking for more Eternal Brews, because we've got one of those coming pretty quickly. In the meantime, we're still streaming lots of Eternal, lots of other different games, and trying out a lot of different stuff on our Twitch TV/LocoPojo, so feel free to tune into that as well. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Pojo. I'm on YouTube, Patreon, Twitch, and Twitter as LocoPojo, and thank you all once more. Have a lovely evening. Cheers.